Darkness enveloped the cockpit of the Phantom Dagger, its controls humming softly as Captain Ryan Caldwell monitored his descent. The ship, engineered for deep space infiltration, cut through the void like a phantom, leaving no detectable trail. Outside, the frozen wasteland of Gorvax, 7 loomed, its jagged ice fields reflecting the pale glow of a dying sun. The planet was inhospitable, a fitting lair for General Rondo, the Zegran Dominion's most ruthless commander. Ryan tightened his grip on the controls, his pulse steady, but his muscles coiled like steel cables. He had faced Zegran forces before, had seen firsthand the devastation they wrought on human colonies. Rondo did not wage war like an honorable soldier. He sent assassin saboteurs, agents of chaos meant to weaken Earth's defenses through terror and deception. The mission was clear. There would be no negotiations, no second chances. He was here to eliminate the general. A soft chime broke the silence, signaling final approach. The Dagger's onboard AI, a minimalistic system designed for stealth, confirmed a safe landing trajectory. Ryan engaged the cloaking sequence and prepared for exfiltration. His insertion pod, barely larger than a coffin, would deliver him undetected to the outskirts of the fortress. He exhaled slowly, checking his gear. Pulse rifle secured, combat knife sheathed, adaptive camouflage engaged. As he strapped into the pod, a whisper of static crackled through his earpiece, an encrypted transmission, but not one of Earth's. His jaw tightened. He was alone out here. No one should be contacting him. A distorted voice, guttural and laced with menace, cut through the static. "Human, we see you." Ryan's stomach turned to ice. The transmission cut off before he could trace it. His instinct screamed of an ambush, but aborting was not an option. He punched the release, and the pod shot downward, slicing through Gorvax 7's frigid atmosphere like a meteor. A violent jolt signaled impact, and then silence. The walls of the pod hissed as they retracted, exposing him to the raw, biting cold. The fortress loomed in the distance, a monolithic structure carved into the ice cliffs. Faint blue lights marked the watchtowers, their sentries barely visible through the swirling snow. Ryan kept low, activating his suit's thermal dampeners to blend with the environment. Every step was calculated, his movements a practiced rhythm of efficiency. The entrance he sought was an auxiliary maintenance hatch along the southern perimeter. His intelligence brief suggested minimal patrols in this sector, just enough security to discourage scavengers, but not enough to deter a professional. He reached the hatch undetected and produced a signal suppressor, overriding the electronic lock within seconds. As the door slid open, warm, recycled air rushed out, carrying the sterile scent of metal and machinery. Ryan slipped inside and sealed the hatch behind him. The corridor was dimly lit, the hum of energy conduits vibrating through the walls. He moved with precision, scanning for life signatures. His visor registered 2 Zegran guards ahead, their elongated forms partially obscured by shifting shadows. They spoke in their harsh, clicking tongue, oblivious to the predator among them. He struck fast, a silence blade to the throat of the first, swift, clean. The second barely turned before Ryan's rifle sent a whispering pulse of energy through his skull. 2 bodies slumped to the floor, and Ryan dragged them into the shadows before pressing forward. Every step deeper into the fortress heightened the tension, coiling in his chest. He was not a man given to paranoia, but the transmission gnawed at him. The Zegrans were arrogant, but they were not careless. If someone had truly seen him coming, why weren't alarms blaring? He reached a junction where the corridor split. One path leading toward the command sector, the other toward a restricted wing marked in Zegran glyphs. His mission dictated a direct route to Rondo, but something in his gut told him to check the restricted area. A calculated risk. He veered left. The hallway led to a reinforced door, locked with a security panel far more advanced than those he had bypassed. Whatever lay beyond was important. He extracted a decryption module and set it to work, keeping his rifle raised. Seconds ticked by. A distant clank echoed from somewhere deeper in the base. The sound of something heavy shifting, moving with deliberate purpose. The lock disengaged with a soft chime. Ryan slipped inside and immediately understood why this wing was sealed off. The chamber was a weapons vault, but not just any arsenal. Mounted along the walls were racks of stealth suits identical to those worn by Zegran assassins, the very ones responsible for countless human deaths. A chill crawled up Ryan's spine. This wasn't just an armory. This was a staging ground. Dozens of suits meant dozens of killers. A terminal flickered at the center of the room. Ryan approached cautiously and accessed the files. His blood ran cold. Coordinates for Earth-based targets. Tactical readouts. Evidence of a new wave of assassinations in motion. Footsteps. He spun, rifle leveled, but too late. The door behind him sealed shut, and from the shadows emerged a towering figure. Not Rondo, but something worse. A Zegran elite, clad in a modified stealth suit, observed him with a cruel glint in his yellow eyes. The alien's mandibles twitched in amusement. "You're exactly where we wanted you, human." Ryan fired, but the Zegran moved impossibly fast, dodging and closing the gap in a single, predatory leap. A bone-crushing strike sent Ryan skidding across the floor, his rifle clattering out of reach. Pain flared through his ribs. He rolled just as a curved blade struck the spot where his head had been. His combat knife was in his hand before he even registered drawing it. The Zegran lunged again, but Ryan pivoted, using the alien's own momentum to drive the blade into its exposed side. A gurgled hiss of pain, but no collapse. The Zegran backhanded him with inhuman strength, sending him crashing into a weapons rack. Ryan's mind raced. He was outmatched in brute force, but not in tactics. He grasped the first weapon he could reach, a Zegran pulse grenade, and primed it. His opponent hesitated, realization dawning too late. Ryan hurled himself backward as the grenade detonated. The concussive blast sent the alien reeling, its stealth suit flickering erratically. The moment's distraction was all Ryan needed. He seized his rifle and fired a burst into the Zegran's exposed head. The body slumped lifeless. Breathing heavily, Ryan secured the data from the terminal and forced the door open with an emergency override. He could still complete the mission, but now he had more than just Rondo to eliminate. This fortress wasn't just a command center. It was the heart of an assassination network. And someone had known he was coming. The weight of that realization settled like ice in his gut, but he pushed forward. He had come here to end a warlord. Now, it seemed he would have to dismantle an entire operation. And he was still alone. For now. The corridor pulsed with red emergency lights, casting elongated shadows against the metallic walls. The silent alarm had triggered somewhere in the fortress, a low, pulsing warning that something was amiss. Ryan moved swiftly, staying within the pockets of darkness where the Zegran patrols wouldn't think to look. The data slate secured to his belt carried everything he had ripped from the weapons vault's terminal. Coordinates, assassin deployment schedules, and the most damning piece of all, Rondo's contingency plans for the final extermination of humanity's outermost colonies. If this information reached Earth, it could shift the war in their favor. But first, he had to survive long enough to deliver it. His ribs ached from the earlier fight, and his breath came in measured bursts. The alien elite had been stronger, faster. Had Ryan been a fraction slower, he would have been a corpse on the floor. The memories sat uncomfortably in his mind, another reminder that he was on borrowed time. He pressed forward, each step calculated. His adaptive suit recalibrated its camouflage, blending into the cold, industrial walls as he made his way toward the command sector. A group of Zegran guards passed within feet of him, their guttural language sharp against the metallic hum of the facility. They were on alert now, but still unaware of the true danger lurking in their own corridors. Ryan slowed, letting them move beyond his line of sight before taking a different route. He needed to reach Rondo's chamber before the general had time to react. He descended a maintenance shaft, bypassing security checkpoints. Every move brought him deeper into the enemy's stronghold, into the very heart of the beast. But something gnawed at the back of his mind. He had been expected. The elite soldier in the vault had made that clear. Someone had known of his arrival and had let him proceed this far. The question was, why? The passage he followed led to a quieter sector, the cold air thick with the scent of ozone and burning metal. Ahead, the corridor opened into a vast chamber, dimly lit by flickering overhead lights. In the center stood a figure, tall, broad-shouldered, his exoskeletal armor marked with deep scars of battle. His posture was relaxed, arms clasped behind his back, but there was nothing casual about his presence. Ryan knew immediately that this was no ordinary soldier. The alien turned his head slightly, revealing his profile. Sharp ridges along his brow, eyes that gleamed like molten gold in the low light. When he spoke, his voice was deep, resonant, lacking the usual contempt Zegrins held for humans. "You are efficient," the warrior said. "I watched you eliminate that fool in the vault. You fight with purpose." Ryan remained still, finger resting lightly on the trigger of his rifle. He wasn't here to negotiate, but this wasn't an ambush. The Zegrin had been waiting, but not as an enemy. Not yet. "You knew I was coming," Ryan said. It wasn't a question. The alien nodded. "Rondo is blinded by his hatred of your kind. He underestimates humans at every turn. That is why he will lose." Ryan narrowed his eyes. "And you?" "I am Commander Krelvik." The Zegrin's mandibles twitched, his tone neither hostile nor welcoming. "Once, I fought with honor. Now, I serve a leader who has abandoned it." There was no immediate response. Ryan assessed the alien carefully. He had fought enough Zegrins to know their culture, their warrior code, Rondo's methods. Sending assassins, striking from the shadows, ran contrary to the traditional Zegrin way. For some, that shift had been necessary. For others, it had been a betrayal. "If you've had a change of heart," Ryan said, "why are you still standing here?" Krelvik exhaled slowly, the movement almost human in its weariness. "Because my honor binds me to my duty. But my duty is no longer to Rondo." Ryan had seconds to decide whether this was a trap or an opportunity. He gambled. "Tell me what you know." Krelvik didn't hesitate. "Rondo's command chamber is sealed behind layered defenses. Your weapons will not breach it. If you try to fight your way through, you will die before you reach him. Then how do I get in?" The Zegrin tilted his head. "The kill switch." Ryan frowned. "Explain." "Rondo's paranoia has grown in recent years. He fears betrayal as much as he relishes destruction. He designed his chamber with a failsafe, an external access point known only to his highest officers, a hidden console in the security sector. If activated, the chamber doors will override their own protocols." Ryan wasn't sure what unsettled him more, the idea that Rondo had such precautions in place, or the fact that Krelvik was freely offering up that information. He studied the Zegrin for any trace of deception, but found none. "What do you gain from this?" Krelvik's golden eyes burned with something unreadable. "An end to a dishonorable war." The words hung between them, unspoken weight pressing down. Ryan nodded once. It was enough. Without another word, Krelvik turned and motioned for him to follow. The path ahead was no less dangerous, but now, at least, he wasn't walking it alone. They moved quickly through the corridors, keeping to the shadows. The security sector was heavily guarded, more so than the rest of the fortress. Zegrin enforcers lined the hallways, their movements precise, weapons held at the ready. If they suspected anything, an alarm would seal every escape route. Ryan and Krelvik pressed against a bulkhead as a squad of guards passed. The moment they disappeared, the two slipped through a service hatch, emerging in a dimly lit control station. Krelvik gestured to a console in the center of the room. "This will unlock the chamber," he said. Ryan moved to the terminal, fingers flying across the interface. He bypassed the security layers with practiced efficiency, overriding the command locks. A final confirmation blinked on the screen. He pressed it. Somewhere deep within the fortress, a metallic groan reverberated through the walls. Rondo's chamber was now accessible, and the Zegrins knew it. Alarms blared as the facility roared to life. Krelvik cursed under his breath, drawing his blade. "They will come." Ryan shouldered his rifle, eyes scanning the room. Heavy footfalls approached from multiple directions. There would be no easy escape now. "Then we hold," he said. Krelvik bared his fangs in something akin to a grin. "For now." Ryan positioned himself behind cover as the first wave of Zegran enforcers stormed the room. Plasma fire erupted, scorching the walls. He returned fire with lethal precision, each shot finding its mark. Beside him, Krelvik waded into the fray, his blade cutting through his former brethren with ruthless efficiency. The fight was brutal, chaotic. Every moment bought them time, but dwindled their chances of escape. More Zegrins flooded the chamber, their sheer numbers overwhelming. Ryan took a hard hit, his armor absorbing most of the blast, but not all of the impact. He gritted his teeth, forcing himself to stay upright. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the tide shifted. Krelvik wrenched his blade free from the last standing enforcer, his breathing heavy but controlled. The corridor beyond was momentarily clear. Ryan exhaled, forcing down the pain. The chamber was unlocked. Rondo was within reach. The mission wasn't over. But now, he wasn't fighting alone. The halls of the fortress pulsed with the sounds of war. Red emergency strobes cast jagged shadows along the walls as Ryan advanced through the smoldering corridors. His rifle hummed in his grip, fresh scorch marks lining its barrel. Behind him, Krelvik moved with the quiet precision of a seasoned predator, his blade slick with the lifeblood of his former kin. They had cut a path through the security sector, left a trail of bodies in their wake. But the hardest fight was still ahead. Rondo was waiting. The general's chamber lay beyond the final security threshold, past reinforced barriers designed to withstand orbital bombardment. But Ryan had forced the override. The doors would open now. No more hiding behind layers of steel and deceit. A sudden tremor rocked the fortress, followed by a deep, reverberating growl that set Ryan's nerves on edge. Krelvik still beside him, his golden eyes narrowing. The sound hadn't come from machinery or an explosion. It had come from something alive. "They released the Shrikes," Krelvik muttered. Ryan didn't ask what a Shrike was. He already knew. A specialized breed of Zegran war beasts, cybernetically enhanced for tracking and killing, faster than any human, stronger than most Zegrans, and bred with a singular purpose: eliminate intruders. A distant clatter echoed through the vents. Then another, closer. Sharp, metallic talons scraped against the walls, moving at impossible speeds. Ryan tightened his grip on his weapon. How many? Krelvik didn't look away from the shadows ahead. Too many. The first Shrike dropped from the ceiling, landing in a crouch barely 10 feet away. It was humanoid in shape, but grotesquely elongated. Its body a mix of sinew and metal plating. Twin blades extended from its forearms, humming with latent energy. Black, pupilless eyes locked onto Ryan, and then it moved. Ryan fired. The first shot clipped its shoulder, sending up a spray of dark ichor. The second should have struck its head, but the creature blurred sideways, impossibly fast. It launched itself at him, claws outstretched. Krelvik intercepted, his blade flashing as he met the Shrike midair. The force of their clash sent sparks flying, their weapons shrieking against each other. Ryan didn't hesitate. He pivoted, tracking the second Shrike that emerged from the adjacent corridor. He fired a short burst, adjusting for its speed. This time, his shots found their mark. The Shrike's chest exploded in a mess of organic and mechanical parts, its body crumpling to the floor. But there were more. A third lunged from the darkness, its bladed limbs carving through the air. Ryan rolled, barely avoiding dismemberment. He came up firing, but the Shrike dodged, forcing him backward into the narrowing passage. Krelvik dispatched his opponent with brutal efficiency, then whirled to assist. His blade found the creature's spine, severing its connection to its enhanced limbs. It collapsed, twitching, then went still. The silence that followed was heavy, thick with the scent of scorched flesh. Krelvik exhaled. They will send more. Ryan wiped blood from his cheek, the wound shallow but burning. Then we don't wait. They pushed forward. The corridor leading to Rondo's chamber was lined with Zegran banners, their insignias depicting past conquests. Human colonies, reduced to mere symbols of victory. Ryan felt his pulse steady, his purpose crystallizing. The final door stood ahead, its armored frame etched with the markings of Zegran royalty. The chamber beyond would be vast, reinforced, designed for intimidation. Rondo did not fear confrontation. He thrived on it. Ryan engaged the panel, overriding the last of the locks. With a deep hiss, the doors slid apart. Rondo was waiting. The general stood at the center of a sprawling chamber, his massive form encased in ceremonial battle armor. Taller than any Zegran Ryan had faced, his presence alone was suffocating. Twin plasma-forged blades rested in his hands, their edges crackling with energy. Behind him, towering windows displayed the icy expanse of Gorvax 7, the planet's eternal storms raging beyond the reinforced glass. He did not speak at first. He simply watched, studied. Then a slow, knowing grin spread across his scarred features. "The humans send one assassin," Rondo said, his voice a low rumble. "And they think it will be enough." Ryan raised his rifle. Not an assassin, a soldier. Rondo's mandibles twitched in amusement. "And a traitor." His gaze flicked to Krelvik. "Did you truly think you could slay me and walk free, honorless cur?" Krelvik's expression remained unreadable. "Honor is not following a fool to ruin." Rondo laughed, the sound like grinding stone. "Then let us see if you can stand against true power." He moved faster than Ryan expected. One moment he was standing, the next he was upon them, his blades carving arcs of violet plasma through the air. Ryan dove aside as the floor where he had stood erupted in molten slag. Krelvik met Rondo's strike with his own, their weapons colliding in a blinding shower of sparks. Ryan rolled into position, lining up a shot, but Rondo anticipated it. With a vicious backhand, he sent Krelvik hurtling across the room, then turned to Ryan with terrifying speed. Ryan fired. Rondo deflected the shots with unnatural precision, his armor absorbing what little energy broke through. Ryan barely managed to block the first strike with his rifle, but the sheer force of it sent him staggering. A second blow followed, slicing through his rifle and rendering it useless. He was unarmed. Rondo lunged. Ryan twisted, barely dodging a blade meant to tear through his torso. He had no illusions. He could not match the Zegran in sheer strength, but he could be faster, smarter. He ducked low, drawing his combat knife and aiming for the gaps in the general's armor. The blade found purchase, sinking into exposed flesh. Rondo roared, backhanding Ryan with enough force to send him sprawling. The impact rattled his skull, stars exploding in his vision. Krelvik was already moving. The Zegran commander surged forward, his blade flashing in a precise arc. Rondo blocked the strike. But the opening was there. Ryan forced himself up, his breath ragged. His eyes flicked to the chamber's structure, support beams, energy conduits running along the ceiling. His fingers found the last weapon on his belt, a charge pack. Small, unassuming, but capable of rupturing the entire chamber if placed correctly. Rondo pressed his assault, driving Krelvik back. Ryan seized the moment, sprinting toward the central power conduit. He slapped the charge pack against its exposed node, priming the detonation sequence. Rondo sensed the shift in battle. His head snapped toward Ryan, realization dawning. Ryan met his gaze. "This is for every colony you burned." He triggered the detonator. The explosion ripped through the chamber, sending shockwaves through the fortress. The glass behind Rondo shattered, exposing the chamber to the raging blizzard outside. The force of the blast tore through his armor, sending him stumbling. Krelvik moved without hesitation. His blade found its mark, Rondo's exposed throat. For the first time, the warlord's expression shifted. Not rage, not defiance, but disbelief. He collapsed to his knees, choking on his own blood. Krelvik withdrew his blade, stepping back as Rondo's body fell. The fortress trembled around them. Alarms wailed. They had to move. Ryan met Krelvik's gaze. Time to go. Krelvik nodded. Together, they turned and ran as the empire of a tyrant collapsed around them. The fortress was dying. The explosion had triggered a catastrophic chain reaction, and the very walls of Rondo's domain trembled as if in agony. Fires raged through the corridors, consuming everything in their path, while the distant howls of panicked Zegran soldiers filled the air. Ryan sprinted through the collapsing structure, his breath ragged, each step a battle against the crumbling ground beneath him. Beside him, Krelvik moved with relentless determination, his golden eyes scanning for the fastest route to escape. A section of the corridor ahead ruptured, flames spewing outward as pressure vents failed. Ryan barely pulled back in time, shielding himself from the heat. Krelvik snarled, gripping his shoulder and yanking him toward an alternate path, a service tunnel running parallel to the main exit. It was narrower, riskier, but the only way forward. They will seal the hangar soon, Krelvik warned, voice edged with urgency. Ryan wiped the sweat from his brow. Then we don't stop running. They pushed onward, the air growing thick with smoke. Ryan's vision blurred for a moment, but he forced himself to focus. Every muscle ached, his wounds screaming in protest, but there was no time for weakness. If they fell behind, they would die here, entombed in the ruins of a tyrant's last stand. As they neared the final stretch, the sound of boots striking metal cut through the chaos. A squad of Zegran enforcers emerged from a side passage, weapons raised, their faces twisted in fury. Their general was dead, their stronghold collapsing, but they would not let the human assassin escape. Ryan dropped into a slide as plasma fire tore through the space he had occupied a heartbeat before. He rolled behind a fallen support beam, returning fire with precise, controlled bursts. Krelvik was already among them, his blade flashing like liquid silver, carving through armor and flesh. A Zegran soldier lunged at Ryan. He sidestepped, slamming the stock of his rifle into the alien's jaw before finishing him with a shot to the throat. Another soldier rushed in, but before Ryan could react, Krelvik's blade found the warrior's chest, dropping him instantly. The last of the enforcers fell, their bodies littering the scorched floor. There was no time to process the victory. The fortress groaned again, a deep, shuddering tremor that signaled imminent collapse. "The hangar is just ahead," Krelvik said, already moving. They burst into the massive launch bay, where Zegran fighters lined the docking platforms. Alarms blared as defensive turrets activated, locking onto them. Ryan dove behind a cargo crate as a barrage of plasma fire scorched the ground around him. Krelvik took cover beside him, his expression grim. "They won't let us leave." Ryan's mind raced. The main launch controls were across the hangar, heavily guarded. Reaching them was a death sentence. His eyes flicked to a smaller vessel docked on a secondary platform, a Zegran stealth craft. Unlike the larger warships, it was lightly guarded, likely prepped for an emergency escape. He pointed. "That one." Krelvik nodded. "Go. I will cover you." Ryan didn't argue. He bolted from cover, weaving between debris as plasma fire rained around him. Krelvik charged in the opposite direction, drawing enemy attention with vicious efficiency. He cut through Zegran troops like a force of nature, giving Ryan the opening he needed. Ryan reached the stealth craft, vaulting onto the boarding ramp. The controls were foreign but familiar enough. He bypassed the security lock, the cockpit lighting up in response. Systems online, engines primed. Krelvik was still fighting. Ryan's hands clenched around the controls. He could leave now, escape, but something in his gut twisted. He made his choice. Gripping the ship's turret controls, he swung the cannons toward the battlefield and opened fire. The heavy rounds tore through the hangar, cutting down Zegran enforcers before they could overwhelm Krelvik. The warrior turned, realizing what Ryan had done. A flicker of something unreadable crossed his face before he sprinted for the ship. Ryan held the fire button until the last possible second, covering Krelvik's final approach. The warrior leaped onto the ramp, just as Ryan lifted the craft off the ground. He slammed the controls forward, engaging the thrusters as they shot out of the hangar. Behind them, the fortress convulsed one last time before the structure gave way, collapsing into a storm of fire and debris. The shockwave caught them, sending the ship into a violent spin. Ryan fought the controls, gritting his teeth as the vessel lurched through the atmosphere. For a breathless moment, it felt like they wouldn't make it. Then, with a final, shuddering jolt, they broke free of Gorvax 7's gravity well, hurtling into the void of space. The silence was deafening. Ryan exhaled, muscles locking as the adrenaline drained from his body. Krelvik slumped into the co-pilot's chair, his blade still dripping with blood. Ryan glanced at him. "You good?" Krelvik let out a slow breath. "I have been worse." Ryan allowed himself a small smirk, then turned his attention to the console. He keyed in coordinates, setting a course back to human-controlled space. The data slate at his belt still contained everything they had stolen: battle plans, colony attack schedules, evidence of Rondo's atrocities. It would change everything. As the ship accelerated, Ryan leaned back, staring at the stars ahead. One mission, one soldier, and an empire had crumbled. Krelvik spoke after a long pause. "Your kind fights differently." Ryan raised a brow. That a compliment? A ghost of a smile played at the edges of the Zegran's mandibles. Perhaps. Ryan let the silence settle, the weight of everything they had done sinking in. He had come here alone, expecting to die for the mission. Instead, he had found an unlikely ally, a warrior bound by honor, not hatred. The war wasn't over. Not yet. But for the first time, Ryan knew that humanity had a chance. And that was enough. The ship vanished into the stars, leaving behind the wreckage of a fallen tyrant.